Hey, lovely. So I just wanted to do a quick explainer about the press conference yesterday. I know there's a lot of confusion about what happened. And yes, the DA recommended that Erik and Lyle should be resentenced, but he recommended that on the basis of they will be resentenced for murder and not manslaughter. And I'm really disappointed about that because I do believe this is a manslaughter case. And the reason being is all of the abuse that they suffered, the horrific sexual abuse, the emotional, the psychological abuse, the coercive control. A lot of people don't understand what coercive control is, but it's very insidious. It's where the person who has power creates dependency. It's where they manipulate and use the victim's biggest fear to keep them controlled and dependent. And it really is an unfreedom and a lack of autonomy and agency. And this manipulation element, the fear and exploitation part of being so terrorized that they're under your control. And it's so insidious, and the trauma that comes with it really does interrupt the development of the brain and the psychosocial development of the child in particular. And we have to remember that Erik and Lyle were children and they were abused from very young ages, so sexually abused from the ages of 6 and 8. So they never really stood a chance. And for me, this was a spectacular safeguarding failure. They did try and tell people, but no one stepped in to help them. And it was in fear that they believed that their parents would kill them. They were absolutely terrorized, and that's why we see the obliteration at the crime scene. That makes sense when you do the crime scene assessment. So I'm actually very disappointed that the DA didn't go far enough and he didn't resentence them for manslaughter, because if that had happened, then it would have been much more straightforward in terms of their referral to the parole board, and then for them to be managed and reintegrated back into society. And that is going to be a big transition for them. But right now, there's a whole time element, that there's lots of other aspects at play. So the first is that it's filed today in court. So there's no hearing, it's just being filed. And then obviously we've got the time window of the election. But Gascon's office was saying that they want the hearing within 30 days to 45 days, but that's not a guarantee, that's not a given. And then in that court hearing there will be arguments of both sides. So the judge may not even agree to resentencing. And let's say the judge does agree, then they will be referred to the parole board where they'll be assessed again, and then the decisions will be taken about whether they and how they should be reintegrated. Because it will be a big adjustment for them. They've spent 34 years and 6 months in prison. So ultimately the parole board's decision also has to be signed off by the Governor Gavin Newsom. So there's lots of different aspects and there's lots of different steps ahead of them. And it could be delayed at different points. And I think we can't ignore the election. So on November the 5th, we'll know whether DA Gascon stays in office or whether Nathan Hochman will take up the position of the DA. And he might have a different view. He might not share the view of DA George Gascón, and he might also decide that he's going to make other representation, and that could delay it again. He would have to have very good grounds, and then it's up to the judge to hear it, and then it could be appealed again. So the ticking clock element, I think we cannot negate, and I just really feel that Trial 2 was a miscarriage of justice, and it was a miscarriage of justice because they wanted a conviction at all costs. And that is the critical part, that with this resentencing as it stands on rehabilitation and due to age, because they were under the age of 26, that doesn't take account of any of that. And Trial 2 went ahead without the jury hearing from the 53 witnesses who testified to the abuse of Erik and Lyle by Jose in the first trial. And also Judge Stanley Weisberg took the decision to not allow the imperfect self-defense defense, which eviscerated the defense. That's the miscarriage of justice. So right now the DA is saving face, in my view, and he doesn't want to admit to any of that going on, and so he's walking down the line of resentencing and rehabilitation. And I just feel that the Menendez brothers yet again are being used as a political football. They've been in prison for 34 years and 6 months. Isn't it time that they were released? Because they were victims of abuse and of trauma. And I believe that they deserve a second chance and they shouldn't have to wait however long this process is going to take and however many hurdles are put in the way. So that's my view. But let me know what you think, and also listen to my latest episode of Crime Analyst, which is dropped on the podcast, because in there I've got the victims' families from both sides, family members talking about what they understood of what happened to Erik and Lyle, and that was from the press conference on October the 16th, which I went to up at the courthouse here in LA, and I also include the press conference that George Gascón called yesterday and just some of my thoughts about that and next steps. So do take a listen to it on the podcast and let me know what you think.